Have you ever felt exhausted, overwhelmed, and still guilty for resting?
Have you ever been questioning who you are beyond all the hats that you wear?
So many women are carrying invisible loads that nobody talks about.
This is a space for women to lay it all down, soften, heal, and create.
Welcome to The Brave Becoming, a podcast on women's mental health and well-being.
My name is Vash, but you can call me Vash, and this is my co-host Vash.
I'm affectionately known as Ash, and I am an occupational therapist in mental health. So we thought we'd start with a little intro episode where you can get to know Vash and I a little bit better, hear about our content, and decide if this is something that resonates with you or if you'd like to stay. So Vash, tell me a little bit more about your interest in working with women and particularly with women's mental health.
I think amongst all of the roles that I play in my life, being a woman is by far one of the most significant and empowering roles. But in me saying that, you would assume that women's mental health would have been a priority for me. And I really wish I could say that I discovered very early on in my profession that women's mental health was my purpose. But it was not. I am guilty of neglecting the woman in me and within myself. So embracing womanhood and my feminine side has always been a very difficult thing for me. And not by choice, but by the circumstances that I was surrounded by at the time. And this is, and has always been a very difficult thing for me for a very long time. So allowing my masculine side to lead and thrive has always come first for me. It is only in private practice, actually, that I started witnessing a lot of women walk through my door, yearning to have their identity as a woman and their feminine side come to the fore, because for the longest time they felt like this part of them was buried by the burdens of expectations by society and just challenges in general. So I think it's this lived but shared experience was reason enough for me to start having these difficult conversations about women. And so now it's not just about me helping women establish what their identity is, but also how do we maintain it in times of challenges? Because womanhood and femininity is not a weakness or vulnerability, it's actually a power that we need to draw from during times of challenge. Okay, so Ash, I mean, being an OT, you've been exposed to both the physical and the psychological. What brought you to the space of mental health specifically for women?
I think for me, it also felt like a calling. And very recently, I went on a coaching course to start your own private practice and start your own sort of business, specifically looking at group therapy. And during this time, we had to engage in a process of finding your niche, or defining, what are you deeply called to? Who are the clients you want to work with? And like you, I'm guilty of running away from it. And I'll speak a little bit more about that. But during this process, it was there again. It was women's mental health. And I think it surprised me and I felt a little bit resistant. I remember we did this collage that kind of spoke to our ideal client. And what you need to do is kind of flip through magazines and find pictures and kind of intuitively think about your clients and what your clients might look like and what the work you want to do looks like. And while flipping through, I just found pictures of women and women smiling and women of all ages. And I think when I looked at my collage when I was done, I was just like, it's very clear what I'm meant to go into, but this is not what I had in mind. When I went into the coaching call or the coaching program, it was very much I thought I was going to go into corporate mental health. And I was at the end of that program and I can't run away from the fact that I am called to work with women. And I think I resonate with you quite a lot in terms of letting the masculine side lead. I rejected everything feminine from the time I was a young girl. Pink was not in my wardrobe or in my vicinity. I would deny that I liked it. I even think I convinced myself that, pink is not my color because it was too feminine. I remember when it was special events and occasions, like a birthday of mine, my older cousin would call and she would wish me happy birthday, and then she would ask like, "Oh, you're going out, and what are you wearing for your birthday?" And I would tell her what I'm wearing, and she would almost like have to force me to dress up a little bit more feminine, and she would be like, "Put a pair of heels on."
Yeah.
She was constantly trying to get me out of my sneakers. So I think now I've just come to a point in my life after many experiences where I have this deep rooted desire for myself to connect with my femininity and my womanhood, and just the strength that comes with softness. And so for me recently, I've been called to work with women in a space of group therapy, to reconnect with that, to reconnect with a softer self, or your softness, or your strength and your softness. So that would look like women who are high achieving but maybe burning out, feeling dissatisfied or misaligned with what they're doing, after years of running after sort of another accolade, another achievement, where your doing has become your identity, or where the only thing you derive meaning from. So I want to go back a little bit to this concept that we both shared and resonate with, of letting the masculine side lead. And I know for me, like I said, it represented a lot of hardness, a lot of rigidity. I would also say I was quite the fixer as well, and I wouldn't always kind of sit in emotion, or allow that side of me to have space, healthy space. I had to, and I still have to be a lot more intentional about allowing the softness, and changing perspective from viewing it as weak, or wasteful. And so for you, what is a way that you began to reconnect with your femininity?
I think, Ash, I'm going to stay on the theme of softness. Because when I think about being feminine, I think of how do we disconnect from the hard to reconnect to the soft part. And it's kind of like finally taking off that armor that you had forgotten you'd been wearing for such a long time. And but the thing is, being hard was never bad for the both of us. Being hard was never bad because it helped us survive. And it does it but in as much as it's helping us survive, it doesn't help us thrive. It doesn't help us breathe or relax and rest. So taking off that armor was, for me, letting the nervous system know that it's safe. You don't need to survive. So this is also in therapy, I think, became very important for me, because it really helped me realize how much the hard part, or the masculine side, was dominating every area of my life. So, how do I go about establishing that relationship with my feminine side? It was not easy at all. And I think it required me, trusting in something that was much greater than me, but also trusting in something that was outside of my control. And I guess you can say surrendering, right? And it could only happen, I believe, once safety within but also around me was created. And for me personally, I think God and my marriage provided that safety net for me, because it created a space for me to exist without having to feel like I need to meet a certain standard or a certain expectation. It accepted me for who I was and allowed me to become, I suppose. But I think, in as much as I say that, when you have someone also in your life, whether that's God or whether that's your partner taking the lead for you, you finally realize that you can rest, but also allow the woman within you to come out, right? If I look at other more practical ways for me personally, it was allowing my softer side to come to the fore in the language that I used, how I described myself. Very similar to you. I think if you open my cupboard, it was just black and navy. So it was the choices that I made and how I presented myself, and the clothing that I wore, and doing my hair and doing my makeup, and establishing a self-care routine, allowing that creative side to come out, the dancing, the listening to the music, but also in the media that I consumed. So watching other women, watching romance and chick flick movies, and all of those things, I think created softness for me to allow that woman to come out.
I resonate with that again, of like when you spoke about not wearing makeup. remember having an argument with my cousin about
Yeah.
I don't need makeup and it's just a cover up, and I would have all of these reasons for why. And I'm still not someone who will quickly put on a face of makeup, but I can now acknowledge it for what it is, and I can now acknowledge it that it's not a cover up, that it's something feminine, it's something that I'm allowed to connect with, it's something that I'm allowed to enjoy. Yeah, and resonating so much with that word you used of surrender, because I think that's what it is as well. And I've also been on this journey of surrendering, because like you said, the masculine role is typically to lead, and that's okay. And I think women as well, we have spaces in which we can lead, but it's not our primary kind of calling, if that makes sense. And yeah, and I think I've been working through issues of control related to that. I remember last year or the year, I think it was last year, I always do a little like, what is your word for the year? And it's also very scripture based, very like faith based. Where I would do a little quiz on this Dayspring website, and it would give you a word for the year. And for the past 3 years, I can say I've resonated with the word. Last year, that word was surrender. And I think I looked at it and I just like, I was like, Lord, is this a joke? Like, what do you mean? And just feeling like I've been led, like you said, with submitting to God, or and at that time I didn't have a partner in my life. I do now, and it's great to have to allow him to do stuff, which I'm still getting used to as well. I found getting into a relationship, it was hard for me to let go of control. It was hard for me to say, can you do this for me? It was hard to lay down and allow him to sort of lead, because we go into patterns of hyper independence. I know that's something that I did. I won't easily admit that I need help, or admit that I like something silly, like there's a really heavy bag to carry. I will do it, and I will make sure you don't see that I'm struggling. And yeah, I think it's just so beautiful to look at that word surrender and to come to a place of allowing others in, which allows connection, which brings in a space, brings in vulnerability, which is so beautiful. Like there's so much connection that comes through vulnerability. Yeah, and just that place of softness.
I just want to add on that, Ash, because you bring in faith and you bring in relationship, and it's so amazing because when we think of the word control, we just think of I, and we don't realize how it actually impacts every other relationship in your life. If you want to be in control, you're not allowing others to, like you said, take the lead. And it was just the other day I was reading something about how God gives us authority in certain areas of our lives, and we need to be able to step into that authority. But when we hold on, as women, when we hold on to this control, we don't allow our husbands or our partners or the men in our lives to step into that authority, and we're getting in, I guess, God's intention for the men in our lives. So I think it's a very beautiful thing to see how our fears and our anxieties and this desire for control kind of bleeds into every other relationship in our lives.
It really does. It really does. Yeah. Yeah. So I think, Vash, currently with the work that you're doing, what are some of the major challenges you're seeing facing women? And maybe these are challenges that are not spoken about frequently enough. Like, what are you seeing?
I think, as you mentioned, Ash, it's still such a massive problem that women are experiencing, but may not necessarily be aware of. And the question I feel we need to be asking is why? Why do women feel that they need to perform? Why do women feel like they need to perform in all areas of their lives in order to be loved, in order to be seen as competent, adequate, or even worthy? So yes, I can sit here and I can speak about depression, I can speak about anxiety and PTSD that women go through. But the deeper question is, what is beneath that? Because depression and anxiety, these are just products of much deeper wounds, of a lot of systematic conditioning, I would like to call it. And these are the struggles we need to understand much more deeper because these are the real challenges that women are facing. If I look at one of the oldest but persisting challenges that women face, and I think it's that competitive space, I can only speak for myself, but I see this happen a lot in the Indian community where girls are always compared to one another, and we always, and it just leaves us feeling inadequate and unworthy, and like we just not good enough for that space. And it made young girls feel like they always needed to do better, they always needed to be better. I mean, you walk into a room full of girls and you think, how am I better than the next woman, and it's so sad to be having these thought processes. So and instead of, I think, coming together in this joint experience as women, we end up isolating from one another, because instead of seeing safety in the next woman, I see her as a competition.
100%.
So yeah, and I think, I mean, if you look at the days of our moms, our grandmothers, our great grandmothers, a woman's role back then was to establish safety in a home, was to establish, to maintain the home, to kind of turn the house into a home sort of thing, right? And back then, this was never debated. It was never questioned. Our moms never questioned it, because even though it gave them such struggle and challenge, they were not given that freedom of speech. They were not given a space at the table to question anything that was happened. And for them, it was like, even though it was dysfunctional, it was functional for them and it worked for them back then. But now the world is so different and the demands are much greater. Yes, we have a lot more awareness, but it's like women are expected to now not just maintain the home, but also contribute to the home financially. So now women have these additional roles of providing, of being independent, but it doesn't mean that the old roles fall away. And the sad thing now that a lot of women have to go through is that there's a lack of understanding, I suppose, in all of these areas, in all of these roles, because we're expected to be 100% in all of these roles. Like, I'm thinking about work, for example. Sometimes your employer just sees you as an employee. You're just this number there. They're not recognizing, yes, you're a woman. Yes, you have other responsibilities. They're expecting you to give 100% in all. And I think that's just impractical and just not possible for us.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think for me, what I'm thinking is going back to you saying that women weren't given the freedom of speech about it, kind of in creating safety, sacrificing themselves to create peace or to maintain peace or maintain a conflict-free space. And I've been thinking a lot about, we're in an era where emotional awareness is a lot more valued or a lot greater. I think I always talk about this when we see like the teenagers at work compared to the adults, and the kind of basic needs or the needs that they're looking for, what they're looking for. And with the adults, a lot of the time it could be like the financial things and the basic things, and am I able to do this? And with the teens is like kind of like self-actualization and who am I, and those emotional awareness, that those emotional needs. And I think in the past, speaking about those things was not supported, because it was like, if you have A, B, and C, you have food, you have a shelter over, a roof over your head, then you're good and you should be good. Your husband's providing all of those things for you, you should be fine. The emotional things were not well understood. They were not spoken about, and if you did speak about it, it kind of did sound like you were rebelling. I've heard of so many stories where I remember a friend telling me about an older family member whose journals they found, and this is a person who's passed on now, and in the journals, when you read it, you could clearly see that this person was going through depression, that they were not okay. And no one would know about this, because women would keep silent. They would do what they needed to do, and they would carry on. And I also think of the women in my family sometimes, just what I hear from them behind closed doors, when there aren't any men around, or when they feel like there's a bit of a safe space. Just the kind of conversations that I've heard of, this is something that I felt, or you can't do anything about this, or this is what we saw our grandmothers do. Yeah, so I just think that emotional awareness, we've made such strides in mental health itself. I mean, if you look at mental health years ago, like pre 1996 even, and what mental health facilities look like, or what mental health awareness look like compared to now, there's such a big difference. And I think now we're seeing a lot of that. We're noticing a lot of that in ourselves as well. And I think, yeah, linking back to what you say, I think women are naturally drawn to giving of ourselves, and specifically to caring, to being the homemaker, and not just caring. I'm not saying just as a mom or just as a wife, but to caring for your friends, to caring for your colleagues. Primary female roles is that caregiver everywhere, everywhere. And I think that giving of yourself can be emotionally exhausting. I also then go back to boundaries as well, and how much we give and how much we think we're expected to give, or being the good woman, the good daughter, the good mother, the good wife, and how sometimes boundaries can be neglected, and we can go into a space of being so emotionally exhausted because we have all this love within us. We have all these people that we want to give this love to. We feel like we need to give off to everyone, and we naturally are inclined to, and we don't, it's not protected. Um, and I think women are socialized to be more in touch with our emotions. So even in the conversations we have, you're giving off, even sitting with a friend, you're giving off emotion, you're taking in their emotion. And it can become, if without protection, it can become a burden rather than something beautiful. And I had a thought that a hardened heart is a heavy heart to carry. So if I don't have boundaries around my heart and around my care, and I don't kind of carefully think of where I'm going to give it out and where my energy goes, I can become quite hard. I can become quite rigid, because when we leave ourselves too open, we call it porous boundaries. We allow in a lot of love, goodness, friendship, connection, but we also risk and kind of allow in the not so good stuff, the stuff that threatens our peace.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we end up getting hurt by that. And I think this is taking the conversation into a different space, but an important one. Sometimes we end up getting hurt by that, and we want to isolate and we want to shut down. And then our hearts are hardened, and we don't want to give off the care, and we're more miserable. So I think that striving without boundaries and the softness and the rest can lead to a hardened heart, can lead to disconnection, isolation. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, boundaries is quite an important topic to be speaking about. And I think when you speak about women's mental health, it's not something you can engage on without bringing up boundaries. And I think when I look at boundaries, and a lot of the clients or women that came to see me, one of the hardest things or rather one of the barriers that prevent us from putting up these boundaries is that, am I going to be rejected? Am I going to be abandoned if I put up these boundaries? If I say no, am I going to be seen as the bad girl? I've been striving my whole life to be this good girl and to be seen as the good wife or the good mother or whatever it is. And now to be suddenly labeled as selfish or spiteful. We don't want that. We don't want to be associated with judgment like that. So we struggle to put these boundaries up. And I always ask the people, the women that I see, are you willing? Are you willing to be the bad guy? Because that's sometimes what you have to be in life. Putting up those boundaries means you are going to have people resisting. You are going to have people dismissing and throwing judgment. But are you willing to go through that to protect your peace? So boundaries, in as much as it's so difficult, because if you think about it, giving, and like you said, the world requires women because we have that nurturing side, we have that lovingness, and the world can't function without it. It needs it.
humanity would cease to exist
without it. Exactly, right?
without the caregiver,
it.
without the
And I think that's what gives us purpose and identity. So if we put up the boundaries, doesn't mean we lose the purpose and identity. So it's definitely a conversation we need to be having.
I think boundaries, like you said, highlighting that it can be so scary because it you mentioned being the bad guy, the bad, you know, and it's sad that we see it that way.
Yeah.
That there's good and then there's the boundaries. When actually there's people pleasing.
Yes.
Then there's good in the middle, and then there's bad of like the too rigid, too disconnected. And I always, like when I work with patients as well, I always kind of prep them for when you're going to work with boundaries, it's going to feel wrong in the beginning. And I know for myself as well, I come from a background of being a people pleaser. I still have to shut her down now and again. And boundaries is what I have to put in place to not be that people pleaser, to kind of say, where am I at? What do I need? What is my capacity right now? And that sounds, and for some people it starts to sound selfish, but you can only pour well from your cup when it's full. And I love the cup analogy. Like if your cup is not full, like where are you pouring from? Where are you drawing strength from? And I think we can talk about how to fill the cup at a later stage. But boundaries, they definitely feel like I'm going against who I am. When actually that's not entirely. It's going against your pattern, your old pattern, or your unhealthy pattern or perspective. And it can make you feel quite guilty. I remember feeling quite guilty when I had to start putting in boundaries. But in the long run, seeing how it protected my ability to rest, how it protected my time and my energy, how it protected my peace, basically. I know people love to hear protecting my peace. So I think when we go to boundaries, maybe like what is something that you're learning about rest and balance at this point?
I think for me, or rather now telling myself that rest doesn't mean I'm lazy. Because previously I had this very distorted thoughts that if I rested, it meant I wasn't doing enough, it meant I was lazy, it meant I wasn't being the good girl that was expected to work hard. I grew up in a community and in a family that glorified hard work. If you worked hard, you were successful. I mean, if I think about every speech, every birthday party, every funeral you go to, they would always say, "Oh, that was a hardworking person. She worked really hard," And it's so sad that I have to be known by my hard work. Is there not more to me? So if you do not have something to do, if you're not busy with something, then you were seen as either wasting your time or just being lazy. So you constantly had to be busy. The only time you could rest was when everything else was done. And I am so guilty of having had this perspective. I idealized my dad. My dad was, I idealized his work ethic. He gave 110% to everything in every area of his life, to the point where it became a self-sacrifice. And back then, it was like, oh my gosh, he's such a hard worker. He's doing so much for his family, and I so wanted to be that. I so wanted to become someone like him until I was much older, and I realized, you know what, this is punishing myself. It led to me being that hard worker, led to me experiencing physical illness, burnout. I was so busy working hard that I had forgotten myself, and I had forgotten every other relationship in my life because I was so busy trying to be that hard worker that everyone wanted me to be. So I think for me, it's now realizing that rest is necessary, and productivity and hard work doesn't necessarily mean I'm succeeding or progressing in my life.
Yeah, and I think there it is again of that, like picking up of the masculine, of idealizing the masculine, and that's what we should look like. As you were speaking about this, I was kind of thinking of how when I grew up, it was glorified that the woman woke up really early in the morning and they started their work early and they didn't have breakfast till a certain time, and now I'm just like, oh my word, like, I don't want to be that. I don't want to do that.
Well, even like, eating only after your husband is eating.
Yes.
Which for me is like so bizarre. Like why, to think that you put yourself last, and it was sad. It was sad to see women doing that.
No, 100%. Yeah. I think for me, when it comes to what I'm learning about rest and balance, is learning that it's not a reward. That's a big thing for me, because I think I don't feel worthy of rest, or I don't feel worthy of balance, or rest rather, until I've worked really hard. And sometimes I had these really unhealthy patterns of like, I'll come home from a full day's work, and until I've done work at home as well, because I'm the person who would take on way too many things. I'd be studying this, I'd be doing this course, I want to learn that, I want to start this, and just hiding my identity and taking on so many things, or putting my identity in taking on so many things, led to me feeling like, I need to feel the need for rest. I need to be tired before I rest. So I'm not working from a place of rest. I'm working really hard to feel I should rest. And I think sometimes working to the point where I'm like, okay, I have a bit of free time. What work can I fill it in? Not, can I rest now? Is this, not planning for rest? And I think that's still something I'm working through, in terms of rest is not a reward. I can come home on a Thursday after an 8-hour shift and then do nothing. And I think that's something that I'm still getting to, that it's not wasteful.
Yeah.
And that rest is that softness again, and I think of the differences between active and passive rest. There's active rest as well, where I could be doing something that kind of like fills my cup, whether it's, like you said, getting creative, or doing something that is, it's still productive, but it's not productive where there's a deadline that you need to meet, or you're not putting it out there for the world. It's just for yourself. And I think that's what I'm learning, is that it's okay to be in that space, and then it's okay to passively rest and do nothing as well. I think I still feel very guilty if I wake up on a Saturday morning late and have a late breakfast, but learning that that's actually needed, that you don't have to spend every single day being productive. Okay, so Vash, what is one thing you wish women heard more often?
I would tell women that your identity, your womanhood, is yours and yours alone. And it is not and should not be a construct of society. I think I witnessed a lot of women having to be told how to be a woman by other women and by men, but by doing this, what we're doing is we're creating our identity as being a reflection of what other people want of us, those expectations, rather than a true reflection of who we want to be and who we are becoming, in our own desires. I think growing up for me, I feared, and this came up earlier, we fear rejection, we fear abandonment, and we so badly want to fit in. We want to belong. That's the thing, right? We want that connection. We want that love from other people. And so we people please again, and we become what others want us to become. And I think it was only in my later 20s, after years of people pleasing, realizing that the more I start becoming who you want me to become, the less, or rather the more disconnected I become from myself, right? And I think when you wake up in the morning one day and you look in the mirror and you're like, who is she? I'm not in touch with who this woman is that I'm looking at. And you kind of get this wake up call of, what have I been doing my entire life? Why have I been trying to fit in? Because the moment I try to fit in, the less I belong in who I am and who I'm becoming.
Yeah, a little bit of a life crisis.
Absolutely. I think it was like a quarter life crisis for me. Like,
it's real. It's real.
What have I been doing? And I think, but I like this, these kind of quarter life crisis, I suppose we can call it, that we're having, because it means that we're becoming more aware and a lot earlier, which is something that I'm also grateful for, I suppose. But yeah, I think that's what I would want women to hear.
I think for me, what I want women to hear is kind of also what I want to hear back myself. It's just like you're enough. Just that exhale that comes with it. You're enough right here, right now. And also just reminding ourselves that we don't operate alone. We operate in connection with others, but going back to that surrender to something beyond yourself. And for me, that's like, God as the provider, God as the leader and the person that I look to for everything. And so I think that's it, that you can exhale now, you can sit down, you're okay. I think I described it a little bit earlier of like chasing after the next thing, and I think we forget to live in the moment. I forget to live in the moment. I forget to enjoy here and now, because I'm always looking forward to the next achievement, or what I'm going to do next, or what I'm going to produce next, or where I'm going next, and I'm living in that, and I'm forgetting to just reap all the goodness of now. And I think if I have that kind of mindset of, you are enough, you are where you are because this is where you need to be. And I think I was saying to you earlier as well of, for me, I have the strong belief that God knows exactly how to get you where you need to get to. And I think when we take control, I know when I take control, I start getting very miserable and very like agitated in the space that I am. Instead of resting, instead of sitting down and letting him fill my cup and provide and allow the path to unfold, walk and listen for his voice to unfold, because that's what I need to do. I don't need to trailblaze the path, man. I think I've been doing that for so long that I just want to hear like, you're enough, this is enough, you're okay here. Yeah.
You speak, I mean, the themes that are coming up is softness, surrender, safety, surrendering, like you said, to something much bigger, but to, I guess, a higher power that is in charge, that's taking the lead, that's in control, so that you don't have to be in control, right? And I think that's the kind of mindset that we're all striving for, when I speak about that mindset, Ash, could you maybe tell us a little bit more about what would like emotional wellness mean for you personally?
I'm going to give you a very OT answer here. So mine would come from whether I feel balanced and regulated. I think the word is also regulated. So I think being able to balance the different important areas in my life and feel, regulated, that would equate to mental and emotional wellness for me. And I think specifically thinking about a balance or a harmony between, in OT, we call it doing, being, and becoming. So it's not just the one. I think we get stuck in the doing. So from what we do, we will derive meaning. But I think being in harmony with the being and the becoming places emphasis on where we derive in identity from. This is partially from what we do, but foundationally it should be, where we feel we belong. For me personally, my identity is faith-based, and it's based on what God says about me. And from what I can do, and derives, some changing parts of my identity from what I do. So meaning that I have some space for the becoming. So allowing all of those to come together. I'm not just doing, I am being, I am what I'm created to be, but there's also room for growth. There's opportunity for growth. I don't have to strive for that growth. It's going to come through my experience, through life, through living, right? And I think that's the definition of emotional wellness, of mental emotional wellness, of having all of those three. I get to do, I get to be, and I am becoming, and I'm allowed that. And if I get stuck in the doing, I neglect the being. And there might be some becoming, but I'm not kind of reflecting on that, or not learning sometimes if I'm constantly trying to do the next thing. I don't know if that makes sense.
I like that you speak about the kind of having the equilibrium in all spheres, because that's exactly what I think mental wellness means for me as well. It's like having that brain fog removed and seeing things clearly, the self-awareness. Not a lot of people actually know this about me, but I've actually went through a really, really dark place. I think it was at the beginning of when I was doing my master's here. And I hit rock bottom, and I don't think I've ever seen myself in a dark space like that before. And I think having hit rock bottom scared me so much. It scared me because I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know how to pull myself out of the darkness. And I just felt like I was going to be there forever. And it was only after I got out of that, and now when I reflect on it, I realized that for me, mental wellness then is getting out of that darkness and creating this psychological and this emotional safety for myself to be vulnerable, so that I don't have to suppress, I don't have to hit that rock bottom again, because now there's safety. Now I'm allowed to be vulnerable within myself. I'm allowed to experience all of the uncomfortable emotions and accept them and not judge them or not want to suppress them. So emotional wellness is coming to that place of clarity, that place of love for yourself, that place of unconditional, acceptance of who you are and where you're at in life.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I think lastly for me, just maybe what is it that gives you hope in the work that you do?
Yeah, I think we both earlier on shared like what our purpose was and why we entered this field of, women's mental health. So I think for me that purpose, I always say it gets me up in the morning and it gets me to work. But what keeps me at work and what keeps me in that therapeutic space is the client. You know, I think sometimes when you see the clients at the very beginning of their therapeutic journey, they are so lost. They sit opposite you, so lost, and they're yearning for this hope. Um, and you know, they feel like the end is so far, or rather, the light is so far. It's unreachable. And as weeks go by, you start to see them kind of grow and develop and break free, I suppose, and it's a beautiful thing to be able to witness, to walk beside them as they go through this therapeutic journey. So I think that for me is what keeps me going, I suppose.
Yeah, resonating with that. I've seen so many people break through patterns and beliefs, and I like to call them like mental strongholds.
Yes.
And when they come out of that, it's like this peace, it's like this exhale, and it's filled with so much lightness and relief. And I've seen that happen so many times. I know it's possible, and I think that's what fuels hope for what we do. Yeah.
Yes, Ash. So I think the conversations that we've been having are so exciting and so necessary. Yes, so valuable. And I think if we had the time, we would be able to go on and on and on about these conversations. But I guess this just provides you guys also with a sneak peek into what is coming, what to look forward to.
Yeah, each week we'll have honest conversations about perfectionism, rest, boundaries, and just what it means to be a woman in this era, and what are the struggles we're facing. So what it really means to care for ourselves in a world that asks women to do it all. So whether you're exhausted, whether you're overwhelmed, healing, or simply just searching for a softer way to live, this space might be for you. So we hope you enjoyed this. We're so glad you're here, and we're welcome to join us again
Next time.
next time. Thank you.